Hi, my name is Julianne, and today I'm going to be talking about The Dark Prophecy. So if you haven't heard, there is a series called Percy Jackson. There's so many books. There's so many. This video is not scripted, so I apologize for any random tangents and stuff like that. This video is going to be a spoiler-free video because I'm planning on just doing spoiler-free videos until the last book, where I'll just wrap up the series and throw in all the spoilers and talk about the series and stuff that happens in it. This is the sequel in the Trials of Apollo series, which is going to be a 5-book series. It takes place in the same universe as Percy Jackson and the Olympians and every book on this show. So the Trials of Apollo follows Apollo, who becomes human, and he's trying to become immortal again. So he has to go on a bunch of quests and prove himself. This is kind of just his story from his point of view, and it's really awesome to get his point of view because I love Apollo so much. He's so self-centered, but it's done in such a hilarious way that you can't help but love him. The first book I felt was more of a filler book. If I'm comparing it to TV, I would say that it was a filler episode. It did introduce important plot points and something that was going on behind the scenes even back in Percy Jackson that we didn't know about, and then you find out in the first book certain things. Overall, it felt like it didn't really add that much to the series and didn't necessarily need to be there, and that in no way is me saying it was a bad book. Just looking at it overall, in the context of the series, I felt like it wasn't really needed. But this book was definitely not a filler book in my head. I enjoyed this immensely. I loved it more than the first book. I really, really had fun with it. I was laughing out loud all the time. It was just so much fun to read, and I really, really enjoy it. And I love the haikus that are at the beginning of the story. I love seeing Apollo. I love seeing a certain character. See, this is difficult. This being part of, a sequel to the first book is hard to talk about because you don't want to spoil the first book. But it's also a spin-off series of a spin-off series. So it's really hard not to spoil stuff that happens in those two series. So I can't tell you exactly the characters who come back because spoilers, and also it's more fun to find out. But there are certain characters who come back that you get to see throughout the story, and it's really nice to have that character come back. I really thought this was a funny book. It was just it was really good, and it just made me realize why I love reading. I don't want to say I was in a reading slump, but I'm not reading as fast as I used to be. I think part of that is I listen to too many podcasts, so when I'm reading, when I listen to podcasts, I'm doing two things at once. I'm listening and then driving or cleaning the house or whatever. So when I'm reading, I just have to sit there and read, and sometimes I forget, I have to read, and that's all I can do. I can't, do other things at the same time. So sometimes I'll just be staring at the page and be thinking about something, and then I realize for, the last 2 minutes, I was just thinking about something else. So I'm trying to, force myself to continuously read and not just randomly stop. Also, with school, I've had to read books I don't really want to read. And some books are okay. Some books were actually really good. But some books were just terrible and I didn't want to read them. Or they were kind of good, but I wanted to read something else. And so finally I'm getting back into books that I really want to read. Reading this book really, really brought back all of that emotion that I feel for reading and just made me realize this is why I love reading. If you read the first book in the Trials of Apollo, you should definitely read this book. It gets so much better. So I found this relevant quote on Tumblr that I just thought was hilarious and kind of just sums up stuff that happens in the book. I believe it's from Welcome to Night Vale, and it's one of the proverbs that they have at the end of the episode. I saw this and I was like, oh my god, this is Dark Prophecy. Everything that happens for a reason, except ostriches. What the hell, man? It sums up Dark Prophecy so perfectly. You can't jump into this series without having read Percy Jackson and the Olympians and Hidden Oracle. No, that's the first book. Without reading the Heroes of Olympus series. Those two series you kind of need to read to understand what's going on in here. Magnus Chase and like Kane Chronicles, like you can read them without reading the other series, especially Kane Chronicles, which is a series I feel like no one's read. Like, seriously, anyone read Kane Chronicles? Like, remember back in the day when it was coming out and everyone was freaking out over the fact that, like, I was like, oh my god, it exists in the same universe as Percy. Like, I had this huge theory that it exists in the same universe because Carter mentioned that he saw this flying horse by the Empire State Building one time, and I was like, oh my god, does it exist in the same universe as Percy? And then we got the crossover series, crossover short stories, and I was like freaking out because it's like, oh, these books are part of one giant universe, and I love it. I have this theory about, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, again, trying to keep spoilers to a minimum, so I'm not spoiling anything that happens in here. But in the crossover, I'm going to say episodes. Oh my god, I listen to podcasts, read books, watch TV, all the lingo just gets mixed up. I say I watch podcasts, and I'm like, that's not how podcasts work. So the thing is, in the crossover short stories, Percy, Annabeth, Carter, and Sadie, they all meet up. Again, I don't want to spoil those because they're really fun. In the last short story that came out with that crossover series, I guess it's a series of short stories, it was mentioned, and I'm not sure exactly who said it, I'm pretty sure it was like Annabeth, it was mentioned that something bigger than the bad guy that they were fighting was bringing them together. And then it ends, and nobody ever talked about it again. You know, ever since Magnus Chase came out, and this series was coming out, and we all know that everyone's like saying Magnus Chase is gonna get in this series, like all the characters are coming back, and no one's mentioning the Kane Chronicles. No one's mentioning Sadie and Carter. It just baffles me that no one's come up with this theory, at least from what I've seen, that, you know, the Kane kids are gonna come back because of the short stories. Maybe no one's read the short stories, but in those short stories is mentioned that something is bringing them all together. And I feel like Carter and Sadie have to show up in this book because who I think is bringing them all together is the bad guys that have been introduced in this series. I highly recommend reading Kane Chronicles and also reading the short stories. I don't know how they're coming back into the series or how it's going to work out. I mean, I feel like Annabeth is going to show up and be like, hey, Percy, you know, we should call up those Egyptian kids over there. This book was so much fun to read. Highly recommend it. It is definitely a good story that was added to this universe that I love so much. It really was just such a treat to have, because reading Rick Riordan's books, they make me so happy and emotionally frustrated. I mean, those last pages always make me mad, but like in the way that you still love the book. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!